So I'm going to talk about this build real quick. The playtests that I can share information about on my starter, this is a LICH build, and there are very few LICH builds out there that does really well. There's a Marrow Shard, which has some issues. There's the Chaos Bolt. There's the Chaos Bolt Harvest, which I really like. More of a niche fun build. And later today, we're going to have on Icy Veins the build guide posted for the starter build of mine. So it's a LICH build. For those of you who are experienced with this game will now notice that there's an Orion's Eye amulet. I will talk about that because the gearing for this character is ridiculously easy. But let's get the things out of the way first. Let me get back to Icy Veins. So when you level this character, you can choose to play the LICH leveling, which I've made here on Icy Veins. It's basically going Harvest approach. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can play with minions. And as soon as you get Stygian Coal, you can actually play the build itself, like from the get-go, more or less. You'll need a certain point in Drain Life before it works. So the build's all about the Stygian Coal. This is a common drop. I gotta zoom out to see where it's dropping from. Stolen Lands, Unique Reset, Wonder Catalyst, Echo Reward. It's a common item, and I only put in an LP2 on this. So, and in there, you're gonna want to focus on Spell Crit Multi. If you get more, you can look at more defensive suffixes if you so choose to. But it's a very common Stygian Coal. You don't need this LP to play it. And that's basically the entire build when it comes to the offensive scaling is about the Stygian Coal and spell crits. So this is not a dot version. I've only seen a couple of versions of Stygian Coals out there. And I can tell you this much based on my testing. This build was face tanking everything up to like 500 plus corruption. And based on the corruption changes and everything we see in the game right now for 1.1, doing 500 corruption is way more than you'll ever need. Clearing is really good, and it just steps on bosses. So I haven't seen in the closed test room. I haven't been able to test the new endgame pinnacle boss. So I'm very excited to see how this build will hold up on that. Idols is super hard. There is life, and then there's life. And the last two idols is life and life, and the last one, this is where it gets really tricky because you have to make sure that you remember that you did life and everything else. So it's very difficult to get this one. Obviously, there are offensive scaling modifiers you could put on idols, but it's not needed. Like not even close. You can even go for flat mana because of the way Stygian Coal works. So before I continue this little rant on how my starter build works, let's talk about Stygian Coal. Gives you ward per second while channeling. I started making a ward version of this. It is not as good as a life endurance version. It's not. You can't sustain it well enough. The Ignite and Den on hit while channeling will not work. It's a bit of a tricky part here because we are using a channeling skill, but we're making it not channel. It's kind of awkward, but we're not going to do that. However, what it does is that our Drain Life will repeatedly shoot Stygian Beams, which is a necrotic hitting spell, which is what we're going to scale with this build. Every point of intelligence gives us an increased beam frequency of 0.01. So if you want more offensive clearing approach to it, you focus your efforts on getting exalted modifiers for intelligence. Then you get a 3% multiplicative more Stygian Beam damage per 10 current mana. That means you want a large bulk of mana pool, and then you want to make sure you sustain that to be basically topped off at all times. So the way you want to do it is you want to cast Drain Life, but you always want to make sure you have full mana, essentially, to do the most damage. So that's how this works. So before we cover the gear and skills and passives, the blessings, we're going to use a critical strike avoidance, and then we're going to have endurance for obvious reasons, physical resistance, and obviously mana and HP is how we're going to run these blessings. There's going to be a link to the build guide in the descriptions below as well, as soon as that's posted on Icy Veins. And before I go through the skills, I do want to mention the Orion's Eye. This is going to be the best amulet you can use this build, and it has by default 0 offensive scaling modifiers. However, the mana is an offensive modifier for us because of Stygian Coal. This is an extremely rare amulet. So this is like the high-end mid-maxing approach amulet. The amulet you want to use before this, or basically what it does is that it makes all void damage that you take be taken as fire. And then you just take less % fire damage. You don't need void resistances. But the big part of this is that this modifier, the mana up here, is a tier 7. This gives you up to 150 mana, which is like tier 8 or tier 9 levels of mana. That's why I want to use it. So before you get that, you can farm the Shade of Orbis to run an Omni. So what Omni does is instead of the reduced damage or less damage taken over time, you get crit strike chance, which is still favorable for the build, level of all skills, and then a ton of different resistances so that you can adjust other resistance rolls on your other gear pieces to give you the void res that we're ignoring because of Orion's Amulet. Here's another kicker. Omni is an amulet that drops from Shade of Orbis at 200 plus corruption. So you can use a normal rare exalted amulet before this, which would actually give you some better stats than Omni. You might want to skip Omni altogether and just use a rare one until you get yourself an Orion's Eye. And the cool thing about that is you can actually get critical strike scaling modifiers. So if you look at crit on prefixes on amulet, you have spell crit and crit multi. You obviously want to make sure that you get a mana roll. In terms of suffixes, you can do quite a few different things. Shredding armor is not bad. We have that on our gloves, which you can have on the amulet for now, or also stack it because we're not going to hit that diminishing return. So, like, I think it's 100 stacks. You can get some other resistances, but also HP. So a rare amulet will do more than fine for this build as well, making it super easy to scale. I might as well finish talking about all the gear before we talk about the other skills, since we've already started. So the build is set up to run one copper ring. Obviously, you can have anything else with intelligence. You can have movement speed if you so choose. And in here, I focused on getting one of our rings having exalted intelligence for the beam frequency and damage, increased critical strike chance, and one of these items needs to have a critical strike avoidance modifier together with a blessing. So if you get a blessing up to 70%, you can get up to 37 on tier 5 crit avoidance. You need to have that 100. Don't skimp out of that. Get 100, and then an elemental rest roll. Now it's very easy on items like this to get like a sealed tier 1, tier 2 modifier. I believe I have that on the belt, tier 2 elemental rest there. You can shove that on basically any piece. I don't have any other sealed modifiers for this build. The other ring is an elemental resistance ring, and that's why I have the seal, because if you don't have a good rolled gold ring, you might want to have a little bit more elemental rest, but if you have a good rolled gold ring, you don't even need that seal mod. In here, again, focus on intelligence. Mana regen is very important. Like I talked about before, you want to have that big mana pool, but you want to sustain that. And then there's double resistance rolls on the gold ring. If you're able to get tons of rest from other sources like a rare amulet or whatnot, what you can do with that other suffix is actually pick up another health modifier. As you can see here, that's 3.3k life with average rolls. If you do max rolls, we're sitting at 4.1k. So it's kind of a big difference if you're able to squeeze out extra life mods. The belt is going to be a Spider Silk Sash base for the poison and cold rest. Obviously, we're going to be looking at mana regen here. You can actually have the exalted modifier to not be on mana regen. It shouldn't be needed. But necrotic damage for damage output, or the hybrid HP to get that extra defensive layer. And then I had a fist resistance specifically here. The other pieces is obviously the relic. We're going to do with necrotic damage, as that's our main focus. We're having a crit multi and spell critical strike chance. Important that you want to get an exalted spell crit chance, because we have very few sources of scaling crit strike chance. So when you actually do use that, you want that to be exalted. And then we have HP and a rest roll. Boots is very simple. Movement speed if you want clear speed. Make sure it's a Solarum Greaves to get that fire rest. You want to have intelligence if you want beam frequency for DPS, then you focus exalted mod on the intelligence. Hybrid HP, flat HP for defense. You can even go for exalted mods on those for more defensive stats. The gloves, there are two things here. Solarum bracers for the crits. We run critical strike chance since it's not as high roll numerical values as spell crit. I did exalted intelligence here. And then we went hybrid HP and armor shred. The only item in the entire game that would beat this for this build, in my opinion, would actually be the Mortality's Grasp. They're not super crazy, but the only way I would use this is if I had an LP3 Mortality's Grasp. Now, here's the thing. They're rare, but if you are able to get Mortality's Grasp, this HP is very big and can replace the hybrid HP. So you need to hit the other 3 mods on a Mortality's Grasp for that to be better, but you still lose some crit strike chance. I'm not really sure, but that's the only one I would arguably use. But then it's the LP3, and that's a bit rough, right? The other pieces is the weapon. After some testing, you don't need the sealed mana regen, which is a prefix. Focus again is critical strike chance, and then crit multi. So if you look at the crits on prefixes here, there's 3. You have spell critical strike chance is actually a higher numerical value than critical strike chance. So it should be looking like this, actually. My bad, let me send you a new planner for that. And that's basically how you want to focus on this. We crit multi, and then you have slow on hit is kind of whatever. That's like the last mod that you shove in with the rest of your forging potential. So spell crits, crit multi, the necrotic chaired pen, and then whatever is left, you just chuck a few points into the slow because you're going to trigger that with the amount of hits this build's doing anyway. So it doesn't need to be tier 5. The chest piece, since we're going for endurance, we want to get to 60% endurance. If you look at the planner here, we have 57.5 with average rolls. Blessing can go up to 30, so you're going to have a base at 20%, so you don't really need much. And the helmet base is going to give you more, but endurance threshold, because of this chest piece, is actually a worse modifier for your EHP than just having a life modifier. So we're going to run a Reperform Exalted here with mana. You don't need the Reperform. If you want to have better defenses, you can actually have Exalted Life, but you'll lose some crit from the Reaper, which I'll show you in a bit. So basically, Reperform, flat mana, HP, HP. And the helmet is an endurance-based helmet, and then focus on mana for damage, intelligence for clear speed and beam frequency if you want that instead, and then just double HP again. It's just life all over this build. It's crazy how easy this is to gear. And I already talked about the amulets. So that's the gear, blessings, and idols. Let's talk about the skills before we... actually, I'll show you the skill tree first. That's actually better. So the skill tree is very simple. We don't care about ward. So we'll be taking up the intelligence wherever we can get it. So this gives us some necrotic res. We'll take 4 points into armor just to get forward. If you want more damage, you can do blood aura. I don't think it's worth it, and I'd rather take the armor. It's only 4 points. And then you max out the stolen vitality for some vitality. And this is because vitality itself is giving you some resistances, but also flat HP. Outside of that, that's our 20 points, 16 plus 4. And the next step would be to spend points in the Lich tree to get the Drain Life. That's how we enable Stygian Coal. So once you get access to the Stygian Coal, then you can start playing that. We're going to be maxing out the Apocrypha for intelligence and mana regen, very important. We'll also be taking Dance with Death for 40% increased damage. This effect is triple at low life. We're going to use a spell called Death Seal that's going to force us into low life, and that's going to triple the value of this modifier or this node to give us more damage. And then you have 2 points just to move forward into Grasp of Fate, because none of these nodes here does anything that we want. And then we're going to move into Crippling Insight, which is lowering health regeneration. We don't care about health regen with this build. We do care about intelligence. This node is insanely good. Then we're going to max out the necrotic penetration through 3 plagues. We put 4 points into critical strike chance because we don't care about attack and cast speed. We just want the crit, so we can get the 4 points traveling into Dark Guard, which gives us more crit, but also more gain on crit, which is kind of whatever in general. We also get crit multi by connecting over to the Clairvoyant Insights. We're also picking up the flat necrotic spell damage, and then the last node in the Lich tree is the Mind Over Body, which is current health drain per second, but we're going to get a ton of intelligence, 2 per node. In the Warlock tree, we're focusing on mana and leech. So we're taking 5 points in here to get us mana on hitting cursed. We get mana regen. We take 8 points into Occultist Mind for flat intelligence, and also mana per intelligence after 5 points is how we get a high stack of flat mana. And then we have Harrowing Armor for flat HP and armor, and we also get the leech nodes from the Warlock tree. And then we have 5 points in here to get us less damage taken per curse. But now we don't curse much at all. We have 1 curse damned on enemies. So we're going to take 2% less damage from this node. You could skip this entirely and just go more damage if you want to. Am I recording a video? What kind of? This is going to be, it's going to end up on YouTube. I want to show you guys, for those of you who missed it last night, my starter build. So let's talk about the skill tree. Let's start with Reperform. So the Reaper form, essentially, for those of you who don't know how this works, you enter the form of a Reaper. That's why it's called Reaper form. What happens then is your health regen becomes 0, and you are decaying life. And the longer you're in this form, the more life decay you're going to hit. When you die, you just transform back to your regular self. We're going to sustain this with Death Seal and a stupid amount of health leech. We can stay in this form for a very, very, very long time. So the reason we're taking Reperform levels on our chest is to get down to Executioner for extra crit multi. Before that, the spec would be 1 point in here, and max this out because we want that crit strike chance, since we don't have many sources of that. We're going to be taking the Mists of Decay for 2 points, 3 in Harbinger of Blood for more leeching, and then we're going to get 4 points in Reaper's Ascendance, and the Reaper's Supremacy increases the frequency of us getting these nodes. This stacks up to 25, and what it does is that you get a increased spell damage per stack by 4% up to 25 stacks, and since we're able to sustain ourselves in this form for such a long time, we're going to hit 25 stacks and stay there for several minutes. So that's how this build works. Like I said, with the Reperform chest nodes modifier, we're going to pick up the extra crit multi. So because of the fact that we're able to stay in the Reperform for such a long time, we can actually use the Death Seal in which you want to get to the Deadlock node. This is the only thing that matters, sort of. Well, there's 2 things. Get this, because what it does is that if your HP is above 33%, and you activate this, your HP is then directly dropped down to 33%, putting you in a low life state. This means that the node on the passive is tripled value. This node right here is giving you increased damage per 3% missing HP, and it's just giving you tons of damage because you're now in a low life state. By speccing into this node is that if you were then dropping from 33% below 10%, Death Seal would just stop being activated, and now you can go up to full HP. So if you drop very low, it just skyrockets yourself up. And the reason this is so good is that when you're in low life, the endurance that this build is working with means that you take 60% less damage when you're in a low life state. You're below 60% life, or you're below the endurance threshold. And then we have the Grim Scale. This makes it so that it drains more health whilst you're sealed, but increases mana regen. This is then countered. We also get more armor for that matter. This is then countered by increasing duration and having this one. This node makes it so that when you're in Death Seal, every current health drain effect, the Reperform, the extra drain from this, all of that is completely negated. You have no decaying health on you because of this, to help sustain the state of this build. And then once it releases, you get the haste effect. I smacked in this one to give you a little bit of HP when you get out. This is completely irrelevant. I didn't know where to put the points. I smacked 3 points in Poison, which does nothing. There's nowhere else you would benefit, because this one has some Necrotic Shred, which would actually be good, but you need to have a ward for this to actually take it into effect. I guess you could put those 3 points in here, because sometimes you're going to have a little bit of ward, but you know, you're not going to notice this. That's why I completely ignored it. So that's how the build works with a Reperform and the Death Seal. So before I talk about the 2 most important nodes here, which is Drain Life, or Skills, and Wandering Spirits, the Bone Curse, the way this is set up is to make the playstyle extremely comfortable and very lazy. So what we do is we have necrotic damage from the Bone Curse, and we have it marked for death. Most importantly, we have kill threshold on it, but this is only used for bossing. We're making it so that you only need to cast this once on a boss, and then it will last forever on that target. So you never have to recast Bone Curse. So the build is basically you go into a boss fight, you cast a curse, and you do everything else you want. You never have to cast this curse ever again. So that's how we do this. It's very lazy. And the way this build works is having Wandering Spirits out, going to Reperform, and then cast Drain Life after the curse. So the way Wandering Spirit is working is to have some movement speed for them, and then moving into getting mana gain with the Disappear, and moving into the left side where we have the reveal rate at ease to get as many spirits out as possible, as often as possible. And then we have 5 points into shredding Necrotic Res, and I smack 1 point in for that damned for that curse. So this is something you're only going to cast once, and then you will never need to recast Wandering Spirits. And the reason for that is Drain Life through the Eternal Servitude. What this does, and here's the cool thing, we're using a channeling ability, but we're not going to channel. This makes it so that as long as Drain Life is being casted, you will not expire your Wandering Spirits. So the way it works is that we're making the Drain Life an actual cast that puts a circular area on the ground, and that will cost a ton of mana, which we're going to have countermeasures for with the mana regen to sustain. And then we're going to increase the duration of this. So I believe the duration is about 6 seconds, right? So this is +3, lasts for 3 seconds, and then +3, so 6. So we have 8-second duration. So you need to cast Drain Life every 6-7 seconds, because you never want Drain Life to not be casted. And that's it. You throw it out on the ground. The Stygian beams are not shooting where the drain life is, if there's enemies around you, it will actually shoot at the enemies. So you cast one out, you run, and then within those 8 seconds, you cast another drain life out. And this is why you have to wait for your mana to get full before you cast it, which is very easy to do. As long as you're casting drain life every now and then, you don't care about where it lands. It doesn't do anything because it's going to cast Stygian Beams from your Stygian Cold. You just run through the map, and on bosses, you can just cast it every 6-7 seconds, and you never lose your Wandering Spirits, and you have all that damage source put out. So we're lowering the channel cost through this, and then we're going to get damage stacks applied from it, and then having the damage increase if they're hitting something that's affected by damned, having damn duration. All of these doesn't really matter. We're mainly using Drain Life for the Eternal Servitude and the fact that we're casting it so that our Stygian Beams will be doing damage. So that's exactly how this build will work. Like I said before, as I play tested it on the live servers, I've been able to face tank 500 plus corruption, and it's ridiculous. But this is my starter, and yeah, I'm gonna link you guys the planner, and there's gonna be a build guide posted before the launch of 1.1. This will be available in Ice Evades. But that's the build. Hope you enjoy it.